So this is my response to the 4 questions that we have. And the first question that was given was, how has your culture impacted the formation of your identity? So for me, that was kind of a difficult question because I had to sit down and think about what is my culture, like what made me me. I didn't have an external source such as, a different ethnicity or a different nationality or different country that, my family came from that really molded my identity in a specific way. So I couldn't lean on that because I didn't have that. So, excuse my cat in the background. I really had to think about, okay, well, can being a millennial, I was born in the 90s, I was born in 93. Can being a millennial be a part of my culture? Well, yeah, of course it can. It's a part of, my social construct and who, that generation, my generation, it really was impacted by a lot of things. We were the first generation that went from not having internet access readily available to having internet access readily available by the time we were, teens. And the same thing with cell phones. We didn't have handheld cell phone devices like kids do nowadays. So that was a really big part of my culture. But I also looked at, can family traditions, relations, trauma, those things impact not only my identity, but be considered culture? And I also found that it was true, it can. So I think there's an external and internal force in culture. So for my internal, which would be my nuclear family growing up, my parents were, they were addicts of various things. And I was put into a position of parenting, 3 younger kids besides myself when I was, 9 or 10. So I was unfortunately a product of parentification, which just is that a parent puts the role of parenting onto one or more of the siblings in order to raise children that aren't their own, that are their siblings. So, their addiction, the trauma, all of those things, the generational cycles of things really affected that part of my culture and who I became and who, how I grew. And then also external, so, school, social media, those kinds of things, music, TV, books, really affected that other part of the culture. So I was raised in the group of, Harry Potter coming out in books and in movies. I was that first generation where the movies were released, and it was a huge deal. And then also Twilight, the Ugly series, those were all things that really kind of molded me as a person later, and my love of reading and movies and things. So how has either thing, impacted the formation of my identity? Well, internally, being a victim of parentification and a product of addicts really affected how I not only am as an adult, like I don't drink, I don't do drugs, I don't smoke, none of that. And it really affected who I was as a parent, who I am as a parent. And it affected, the way I brought up my children. I was a parent, like I said, from 9 or 10, raising my siblings, so I already kind of knew the ropes by the time I got to 20 and had my first daughter. But it definitely impacted the way my children live now, and how I parent them at this age. Because at this age, my daughter is 9, my oldest is 9, and I was already, cooking, cleaning, getting kids up for school, checking their homework, signing my parents' name for things, making sure they had bath, bedtime, the whole 9 yards. My daughter doesn't have that and never will. And that was just not my parents. That was generations of the same thing, of parentification, which I broke. So that really affected the formation of my identity, being able to break those generational cycles and traumas. And not let my kids continue the cycle or keep the cycle going. That part, anyway, affected that. And then Externally, like I said, was a 90s kid. I listened to NSYNC, the Backstreet Boys, NSYNC rules. Twilight, Harry Potter, the Uglies series, Catching Fire, all of those things, they were my escape from what I was going through in reality. And I was really able to dive into the books. And the same thing with music. I would, need that motivation of music, of moving, to the beat and to just kind of forget where I was at and just dance by really involving and immersing myself into either stories or music or TV. And my choice was books or music. I wasn't really a huge TV kid. But I think that's affected my identity because I'm a huge book nerd. Last year, I think I mentioned this in one of my other classes. Last year, from September to December, my husband was deployed from December to the end of January. So from September of 22 to December 31st of 22, I read 54 books on a Kindle. And then I read an additional 5 in paperback. And then January 1st to the end of January, I read an additional 10. So I read 65-ish, 67 books in a very short amount of time. Something I wasn't able to do for a long time, just because I hadn't had the time. And so it really affected how my way to escape and to kind of bring myself into a new world, which I really identify that as my formation of my identity is, I love reading. I love, going to different places. I'm a writer. I write novels and books myself. So I really think that is my culture, and that's how it affected me. Also, a couple other things, culture-wise, all the foods that we had growing up, the weird, I don't know if anybody who else is a millennial in here remembers, the purple ketchup. Gross. Toaster strudels. Just so many of these other, food things that really kind of affected the way I now eat and feed my kids. I'm not a super health nut at all. But I make sure I have a decent balance because a lot of the stuff we grew up with was processed. So I think that's how the culture has impacted the formation of my identity. So the second question is, what part of my identity do I think other people notice first? I hope people notice my kindness and my givingness. In the Christian community, it's called a servant's heart. I think a lot of people notice those things. In reality, though, I think a lot of people notice my independence, my unwillingness to ask for help even if I need it. And I think that's one of my biggest positives and negatives is I can do anything, but I can't do everything, but I'll do it anyway to be independent because, again, going back to the whole culture and parentification thing, I couldn't count on anybody to do it for me. So I had to learn and adapt. So, and the third question is, what part of my identity am I most proud of? I would say my independence. I am most proud of my independence. I think I'm proud of the fact that, you give me a quick YouTube video and, maybe a day at most. Probably more like a few hours. And I'll be able to pretty much do anything with a little bit of trial and error. For example, my dishwasher was acting up the other day, and instead of calling a handyman or my husband, I decided to watch a YouTube video on it and take it apart and fixed it myself. And I've done that with electrical, that light right there. It was on the fritz, and I rewired that. It's fine. It's up to code. The other ones, I did the same exact thing. I'm very great at being independent. It's both my greatest asset and my like least favorite asset as well. And then the last question is, do you think your identity differs on social media? No. Who you see here, who you see on Facebook, I don't do Instagram, but Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and who you see in real life is the same exact person. I don't air my dirty laundry on Facebook, social media, anywhere. I am literally the same person you see here as you see on social media. My house is never perfectly clean, so you'll never see that on social media. So I don't hold this, I have to be perfect on social media so everybody thinks I have a perfect life and a perfect husband and perfect kids and a perfect house. But in reality, I'm struggling and I don't have any of those things. If I'm a hot mess, you'll know I'm a hot mess. It is what it is. I think a lot of people prefer to be a different person on the person they want to be on social media. The person that they thrive and they strive to be, because I think a lot of people think that if I just act the part, if I like everybody think I'm the part, eventually I'll be the part. It's like dress the way you want to dress for the work that you want in the future. Go to work dressed in a suit and tie, which is great and all, except if you work at like Arby's. So I really think that my identity on social media and in person are totally the same person. I don't think there's any difference. So, sorry this was so long. Thank you for watching if you did, and I look forward to responding to 2 of you guys by Sunday.